Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Connor Mitchell always thought he knew his wife better than anyone else in the world. At 30, married 5 years, he and Jenna were the kind of couple neighbors pointed to as an example. They lived in a cozy house in a quiet Denver suburb, with a well-kept yard and a porch where they spent Saturday afternoons sipping coffee and planning their future. No kids yet, they decided to focus on building solid careers before starting a family. Connor worked as a project manager at a reputable construction firm, overseeing commercial projects around the city. Jenna was an events coordinator at a marketing company, organizing conferences and product launches that often made the local social pages. Their routine had a comfortable rhythm. Connor left at 7 every morning, got home around 6. Jenna had more flexible hours, sometimes working from home, other times spending the whole day at some hotel setting up events. They ate dinner together most nights, watched shows on the couch, made love with the frequency of a couple who still found each other attractive, even if the urgency of their early years had faded. It was a good life. Solid. Predictable. That Thursday in March, Connor remembered noticing it was colder than usual. A cold front had rolled in unexpectedly, bringing snow in the middle of spring. He got home at 6:15, shoulders tense after a tough meeting with a client who wanted changes to a project already underway. All Connor wanted was a hot shower and maybe some Chinese takeout so he wouldn't have to cook. But when he opened the door and stepped into the living room, something was wrong. Jenna was sitting on the couch, legs pulled up under her, arms wrapped tightly around herself. The lights were off, only the grayish light from the window illuminating the space. She was staring into nothing, her face pale, eyes swollen like she'd been crying for hours. "Jenna?" Connor said, closing the door behind him and dropping his briefcase on the floor. "What happened? Did someone die?" She looked up at him, and there was something in that look that made Connor's stomach tighten. It wasn't sadness. It was worse. It was guilt. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I have to tell you something." Connor stood frozen in the middle of the room, coat still on his shoulders, feeling a strange chill crawl up his spine. Part of him wanted to say it was okay, that she could tell him anything. But another part, the more instinctive, primal part, already knew what came next would change everything. "Tell me what?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Jenna closed her eyes, took a deep breath like she was bracing herself to dive into icy water. When she opened them again, tears were streaming freely. "I cheated on you, Connor. I cheated on you with Dylan." The name took 3 seconds to register in Connor's mind. Dylan. Dylan Patterson. His paternal cousin, just a year younger than him. Dylan, who came over almost every weekend for barbecues. Dylan, who sat on the same couch where Jenna now sat, watching football games with Connor. Dylan, whom Connor didn't just consider family, he considered one of his closest friends. The room seemed to tilt, like the floor had given way beneath him. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there, letting the words sink in like they'd been spoken in a foreign language. "Connor, please, say something," Jenna begged, standing up from the couch and taking a step toward him. He raised his hand, stopping her mid-movement. It wasn't a threat. It was just a gesture that clearly said, "Don't come near me." "How long?" Connor asked, surprised at how calm his voice sounded, almost clinical. 8 months, Jenna whispered, the words coming out like they'd been dragged from her against her will. 8 months. Connor ran the math in his head. 8 months ago was July. Robert's birthday party, where he'd left early because of an emergency call from work. One of the crew guys had gotten hurt on the job site and he needed to go to the hospital to sign paperwork. He remembered asking Dylan to take Jenna home. "Sure, cousin. Leave her with us," Dylan had said with that easy smile Connor had always kind of envied. "It started at Robert's party," Connor said, not as a question, but as a statement. Jenna looked surprised he'd figured it out so fast. She just nodded, tears falling silently now. Connor felt something strange happen inside him. Not anger, not yet. It was like all his emotions had been sucked out, leaving behind nothing but a cold emptiness. He looked at Jenna, the woman he'd married in a beautiful ceremony in her parents' garden, the woman he'd promised eternal love to, and felt nothing but a freezing indifference. "Pack your things," he said simply. "What?" Jenna blinked, confused. "Pack your things. You have 20 minutes. Connor, wait, we can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," Connor interrupted, his voice still that unnervingly calm tone. "You cheated. With my cousin. For 8 months. You looked me in the eye every single day knowing what you were doing. So no, Jenna, there's no conversation. Pack your things and leave my house." "Our house," Jenna corrected automatically, then immediately looked like she regretted it. "My house," Connor corrected sharply. "It's in my name. Remember? You wanted it that way because your credit score was bad back then. So take what's yours and get out." Jenna tried one more time. She stepped closer, reached out to touch his arm, but Connor pulled away like the contact could infect him. "Please, Connor. I made a terrible mistake, I know that. But we can try to fix this." 18 minutes, Connor said, glancing at the wall clock. Something in his tone finally made Jenna realize there was no negotiation. She trudged up the stairs, and Connor heard her opening drawers, dragging suitcases, sobbing loudly. He stood in the living room, staring at the couch where they'd spent so many nights together. Where they'd made love more than once. Where Dylan had sat, accepting beers Connor pulled from the fridge, laughing at jokes, pretending to be the loyal cousin. 23 minutes later, Jenna came down with 2 large suitcases. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face streaked with tears. She stopped at the door, looking at Connor one last time. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. Connor didn't answer. He just opened the front door and held it, waiting for her to leave. Jenna stepped through, and Connor shut the door behind her before she even reached her car. Through the window, he saw her pull out her phone and make a call. He didn't need to guess who she was calling. 15 minutes later, Dylan arrived in his blue Ford pickup. He didn't look at the house. He just helped Jenna load the suitcases into the bed, and they drove off. Connor watched it all from the living room window, drinking the bourbon he'd poured, the first of many that night, he already knew. But the bourbon didn't bring the numbness he expected. It brought anger. A rising, hot anger that started in his chest and spread through every limb. Connor looked at the clock. 9 p.m. He grabbed his car keys. Dylan's apartment was 3 blocks away, in a complex built 2 years earlier. Connor knew the place because he'd helped Dylan move in. He'd carried boxes, assembled furniture, drunk beers on the tiny balcony while Dylan complained about the high rent. Connor parked on the street and walked up to the 2nd floor, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. He knew the number, 2B. When he got to the door, he didn't hesitate. He knocked hard enough to make the metal vibrate. Dylan opened the door with an expression that mixed guilt and defensiveness. Behind him, Connor could see Jenna sitting on the couch, eyes wide with fear. "Connor," Dylan started, but didn't get to finish. "You," Connor said, his voice low and dangerous, "are the cowardest person I've ever met. Dude, I know you're upset." "Upset?" Connor let out a humorless laugh. "You think I'm upset? You slept with my wife. For 8 months. You sat on my couch, drank my beer, ate at my table, then went to bed with her while I was working to pay the bills. And you think I'm just upset? Look, we didn't plan this," Dylan tried to explain. "She chose to be with me," Dylan said, and now there was a challenge in his voice. "She chose to love me." That sentence broke the last thread of control Connor had left. He lunged, his fist connecting with Dylan's jaw before either of them could think. Dylan staggered back, hit the hallway wall, then recovered and shoved Connor hard. They tumbled down the narrow hallway, fists flying, neither of them really knowing how to fight but both fueled by pure rage. Doors began to open. Neighbors came out to see what was happening. Someone yelled they were calling the police. Two men, one of them the neighbor next door, a big guy in his 40s, finally managed to pull Connor and Dylan apart, each holding one of them. "Let me go," Connor said, trying to break free. There was blood on his mouth, he didn't know if it was his or Dylan's. "You need to leave," the neighbor said, not with anger. There was something close to pity in his eyes. Connor looked at Dylan, who was being held by the other man, his lip bleeding, his eyes already swelling. Then he looked at the apartment door, where Jenna stood, hands over her mouth, horrified. "You deserve each other," Connor said, then turned and walked down the stairs before the police arrived. The weeks that followed were a blur. Connor hired a divorce lawyer, a serious 50-something named Richard Holbrook who'd handled worse cases. Since the house was in Connor's name and they had no kids, the process would be relatively simple. Colorado was an equitable distribution state, but Jenna had little to claim. She'd contributed financially, yes, but Connor could prove he'd paid the down payment and most of the mortgage himself. Connor blocked Jenna's number. Blocked Dylan. Blocked anyone who tried to mediate or ask him to, at least hear her side. He didn't want to hear. There was no side that justified 8 months of betrayal. The family fractured instantly and brutally. Dylan's mother, Aunt Patricia, Connor's father's sister, called her own son crying, saying he'd destroyed the family. Uncle Robert canceled the traditional summer barbecue because he knew Connor and Dylan couldn't be in the same room. Cousins took sides. The family WhatsApp group exploded into arguments until someone just deleted it. But Jenna's real blow came faster than any divorce filing. 3 weeks after she moved into Dylan's apartment, Connor got a message from an unknown number. It was from one of Jenna's friends, a woman named Sarah Connor had met a few times at events. "I thought you should know, Dylan broke up with her. He can't handle the guilt. She's looking for somewhere to live." Connor deleted the message without replying. It wasn't his problem. But the information left him with a bitter satisfaction. Dylan, the man Jenna had destroyed her 5-year marriage for, had simply walked away when reality hit. When the family cut ties. When friends drifted off. When he realized stealing his cousin's wife had consequences. 2 months passed. The divorce moved forward smoothly. Jenna had signed all the papers without contesting anything, probably driven by guilt. Connor changed the locks on the house, installed security cameras after Jenna showed up one night trying to talk. He redecorated the living room, the bedroom, anywhere that still had her mark. He donated most of the clothes and belongings she'd left behind. That's when Melissa came into the picture. Melissa was Jenna's younger sister, 2 years younger, and Connor had always had a cordial relationship with her. She was a nurse at a downtown hospital, working night shifts in the ICU, and had always been kind to Connor during family dinners. But after the betrayal, Melissa did something that surprised Connor. She showed up at his door with a casserole dish. "I figured you weren't eating right," she said simply when Connor opened the door, confused. "And I know you like lasagna." Connor stood speechless for a moment, then took the dish and invited her in. They talked for 2 hours that night. Melissa didn't defend her sister. Didn't ask him to reconsider. She just listened when he needed to talk, and offered a shoulder when he needed silence. What she did was unforgivable, Melissa said at one point, her words clear and unflinching. "I love my sister, but she's the dumbest person on the planet for throwing away a man like you." Melissa came back the next week with more food. And the week after that. The visits became part of Connor's routine. He started looking forward to them, preparing for them. They talked about everything, her work at the hospital, his projects at the construction firm, books, movies, life in general. Melissa was easy to be around. She didn't have Jenna's dramatic intensity. There was a calmness to her, a stability Connor hadn't realized he'd been searching for. The first time he kissed Melissa was 4 months after the separation. They were in the kitchen, she'd brought ingredients to cook dinner together, a Thai recipe she wanted to try. Connor was chopping vegetables, Melissa was frying chicken, and she said something that made him laugh for the first time in months. When he looked up, she was already looking back, and somehow it felt natural to lean in and press his lips to hers. "Sorry," Connor said when he pulled away, suddenly unsure. "Don't apologize," Melissa replied, smiling. "I was waiting for you to do that." Their relationship developed slowly, carefully. Connor didn't want to rush anything, not after what he'd been through. But Melissa was patient. She didn't pressure, didn't demand. Just was there, consistent, real. It was inevitable Jenna found out. Connor wasn't hiding, it simply wasn't her business anymore. But when the news reached her through mutual friends, Jenna exploded. She called Melissa in a frenzy of rage and desperation. Connor was there when the call happened. He and Melissa were having dinner when her phone rang. Melissa looked at the screen, sighed, and answered on speaker. "How could you do this?" Jenna screamed through the line, her voice shrill. "How could you be with my husband?" "Ex-husband," Melissa corrected calmly. "And I can be with him because you destroyed your own marriage. Connor deserves to be happy, Jenna. And I'm not sorry for being by his side now. You're my sister. And you cheated on the man you promised to love and honor. With his cousin. For 8 months. So don't come talk to me about family loyalty." There was silence on the line, then the sound of Jenna sobbing. "I made a mistake," Jenna sobbed. "You made a choice," Melissa corrected. "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the store. You chose, day after day for 8 months, to betray the man who loved you. Now live with the consequences." Melissa hung up without waiting for a reply. Jenna's family reacted in ways none of them expected. Her parents, Mark and Diane Thompson, were initially shocked when they learned their younger daughter was dating their ex-son-in-law. But when Melissa explained the situation, when they truly understood the extent of Jenna's betrayal, something changed. "Jenna destroyed something beautiful," Diane told Melissa in a conversation Connor overheard when he visited his in-laws, ex-in-laws technically. "And you're helping Connor heal. I don't see a problem with that." Mark was more direct, Connor was always a good man. Jenna was just too stupid to know what she had. It wasn't unanimous. Some of Jenna's aunts and cousins were outraged, called Melissa a traitor. But most, especially those who knew Connor well, supported the new relationship. Some even said outright that Melissa and Connor made more sense together than Jenna and Connor ever had. Months turned to a year. Then 2. Connor's divorce was finalized 6 months after the initial separation, quick, clean, uncomplicated. He kept the house, paid Jenna a fair amount for her contribution, and never spoke to her or Dylan again. Dylan, Connor learned through family gossip, had moved to another state. Arizona, maybe. He couldn't face anyone in Denver anymore, not after everything. His career as an insurance sales rep had suffered, the family scandal had spread through professional circles, and his reputation was tarnished. Jenna, meanwhile, was working temp jobs. Her position at the marketing firm had ended, not formally because of the scandal, but it was obvious her reputation in Denver's corporate circles was ruined. Gossip travels fast in tight professional circles. Connor and Melissa got married on a September morning, 2 years after the confession that changed everything. They chose an intimate ceremony on the California coast, in Carmel by the sea, with an ocean view. Only immediate family and closest friends were there, 30 people total. Mark walked Melissa down the aisle, his eyes shining with happy tears. Diane cried through the whole ceremony. Jenna wasn't invited. She didn't even find out until after, when photos started appearing on social media from cousins who attended. Connor saw, through a mutual friend, that Jenna had commented on one of the photos, a comment that was quickly deleted, but not before someone took a screenshot and showed him. "You're celebrating betrayal," she'd written. Melissa replied, at the time, with her own public comment, "There's no betrayal when you've already destroyed what was there." Connor was free. I was free. And we chose to be happy together. Their honeymoon was in Santorini, Greece. 2 weeks of sun, wine, and the feeling of starting something new far from the ruins of the past. When they returned, Connor and Melissa moved into a new house, a house with no memory of Jenna, only their future together. 3 months after the wedding, on a cold December afternoon, Connor had to go to the grocery store to pick up ingredients for the Christmas dinner he and Melissa were hosting. He was in the wine aisle, choosing a Merlot, when he saw her. Jenna was at the checkout, wearing the store's green uniform, scanning items for an elderly woman. She looked thinner, her face older than Connor remembered. There was something worn down about her, like life had taken more than just a husband. For a moment, Connor considered going to another line. But he decided he wouldn't let her have even that power over him. He walked up with his cart, placed his items on the conveyor, and waited. Jenna looked up and recognized him immediately. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the first bottle of wine to scan. "Connor," she whispered, almost inaudible. "Jenna," he replied, neutral. She scanned the items in silence, her hands moving mechanically. When she reached the end, when the total appeared on the screen, she finally spoke. "I saw the photos. From the wedding." Connor swiped his credit card, not responding. "You look happy," Jenna continued, and there was something broken in her voice. "We are," Connor said simply. At that moment, Melissa appeared down the aisle, carrying a box of chocolates they'd forgotten. She stopped beside Connor, slipped her hand naturally around his waist, then noticed who was at the register. "Hi, Jenna," Melissa said, her voice polite but cold. Jenna looked at her sister, at Melissa's hand on Connor's waist, at the wedding ring gleaming on Melissa's finger, the ring Connor had personally chosen, a bigger, more beautiful diamond than the one he'd given Jenna years ago. "Hi," Jenna replied, her voice nearly inaudible. Melissa placed the chocolate box on the conveyor. Jenna scanned it with trembling hands, added it to the total, and completed the transaction in silence. When she handed over the receipt, her eyes were wet. Connor grabbed the bags, Melissa took a few, and together they turned to leave. Connor didn't look back. Melissa glanced once, quickly, then followed Connor out of the store. In the car, Melissa held Connor's hand as he drove. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," Connor replied, and it was true. He didn't feel anger. Didn't feel sadness. Just a complete detachment from that chapter of his life. That night, as they cooked dinner together in the kitchen of their new house, with soft music playing in the background and snow starting to fall outside, Connor realized something: he'd moved on. Completely. Jenna was just someone he'd known once, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. "What are you thinking about?" Melissa asked, noticing he'd stopped chopping vegetables and was staring out the window. "That life is strange," Connor said. "How something so bad can lead to something so good." Melissa stepped closer, wrapped her arms around him from behind, rested her chin on his shoulder. "Life collects," she said softly. "It collects from those who deserve it. And rewards those who deserve it too." Connor turned in her arms, kissed her forehead. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Melissa replied. And in that warm kitchen, with snow falling outside and dinner simmering on the stove, Connor knew he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever: a home. Not a place, but a person. And this time, it was the right one. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.